Alright guys, so let's cover the second part of the 3-part rear body lock series. Total 4-point standing rear body lock. Obviously we're covering defensive options, but for us to understand the position, we need to understand what our training partner or opponent's offensive options are, right? So 4-point position is basically going to be, if I'm in turtle, we climb up to our hands and we get off our knees here, right? So it's kind of a less used position in jiu-jitsu because a lot of people feel like as they, obviously in turtle, it's hard for them to place hooks. It's a little easier to place hooks on the hand, and it's much easier to place hooks when the hips are off the ground. But obviously there's other factors to take in, and that is if they try to jump hooks and our hips are so high, they might fall off the top. But again, a lot of jiu-jitsu guys don't really play it, more MMA-based grapplers and more guys with a wrestling background. But to understand Nick's options from here, right? If Nick's behind me with a rear body lock, I come up to a 4-point. Nick's probably, his most conservative option is to basically return me to the mat here. He might do something like stomp on my foot here and knock me all the way down. And then obviously, the lower I am to the ground, the closer he is to consolidating the position, and the closer he is to safely going for a submission. But he could, from the same position here, Nick's got his rear body lock, he could, from this position, if points were key here, he could dive hooks in. He could place these hooks inside here, right? Which is obviously, these are his 2 key options here. If we come back a step here, what we can do is, if I'm really worried about Nick diving hooks, I can actually touch my knees and elbows together. So now when Nick goes to dive hooks in, there's very little space there. So obviously if I'm on my hands and there's space between my knees and elbows, Nick can dive in his hooks and he can score these points, or potentially he could start to fall off the top and he could start to lose the position. He might score points if he hangs on there for 3 seconds, right? But again, the higher my hips are and the closer my hands are to my feet, the more likely he's going to fall off. So obviously, if he does get hooks and we're trying to touch knees and elbows together there, my hips are coming more in line with my shoulders, and it's more likely that he's not going to get shaken off the top. So knee-elbow connection from a 4-point is a preventative option for them placing hooks. So one more time, Nick's next to me here with a rear body lock. If I'm really worried about him scoring points, I'll touch knees and elbows together. And now if he really commits, so he's going to fall straight over the top. And he'll fall straight off, right? So basically, in terms of understanding the position, there's a conservative option, return us to the mat, or they can dive for hooks. And again, we can make predictions about what they're going to do based on what point it is during the round or what point it is during the match. Time's running out, they need points, probably more likely to dive for hooks. Early in the match, they want to take a conservative option and take less of a risk in losing the position. They're probably going to be looking to return you to the mat. A third option, I should say, is they could potentially, if they're not confident returning you there at diving hooks, they could return and shoot a takedown from there, jump on your legs basically. But those are the 2 key options, and now we'll talk about some defensive strategies from this position here. All right, guys, let's talk about the first option from this position, and we'll talk about it in the context of them placing hooks in. Like I said, it's not a back defense DVD. It's more of a scrambling options DVD here. So we have to talk about if we go to 4-point, because as you develop these skills, people are going to jump hooks on you. You're not always going to be able to go knee-elbow connection and block their hooks. You're either going to jump 2 hooks or a single hook from here. And I don't want you to, again, be so concerned about these hooks from this position. If I'm in a 4-point and Nick has 2 hooks in, if I'm so high off the ground, we're much, much safer here. If Nick goes to switch off to a strangler or anything, he's going to just fall straight over the top. If he has a seatbelt, guaranteed to fall over the top. If he has a rear body lock, he can hang on there, but chances are he still is at risk of slipping off the top there. So let's take a look at it. And again, I'm going to have the same strategy, whether he has a single hook
whether he has 2 hooks, or whether he has a seat belt, or whether he has a rear body lock here. Just know that if they have a rear body lock, it's going to be much harder to shake them off. So let's say Nick's off to the side here, he's got a rear body lock. Whether he's off to the side or not, whenever I'm coming up here, I'm going to step out and create a little bit of an angle so that my weight gets away from Nick in this position. And let's say I miss the opportunity of that knee elbow connection and Nick dives 2 hooks in here. What I want to make sure is that I keep my hips as high as possible in relation to where my hands are. So obviously if my hands come forward, thank God Nick's so light, I'm not going to have as much of a steep angle with my back. So if I'm here, I want to walk hands to feet, and you can see the angle that creates. Nick's still pretty strong here, right? But I want to start twerking my butt, and you see Nick start to slip. I can reinforce this by grabbing the head here. So let's try it one more time, but Nick's very sticky from this position. If at any point we can secure the head, it's really going to help us kill that positioning here. So if I'm shaking Nick and I'm already getting him this far, I want to start pulling his head, and that's going to help me pull his hips over the top. But again, just so you guys know about how safe you are in this position, if Nick dives hooks in on me here and he thinks that he's going to transition to a strangle, watch what happens. He falls straight off, right? I was explaining from turtle on the ground the importance of staying behind 2 arms. The higher our hips get off the ground in relation to our upper body, the more important that concept is. So again, if you go into a 4-point, we're dealing with a white or blue belt here and they think, shit, his hands are on the ground, I'm going to strangle him, they're going to fall straight over the top. But again, when we're here, I'm in this 4-point position here, I don't want to be out here. They're going to be able to stay on very easy. I want to walk hands to feet, and we want to start bouncing here, and they're going to start to slip over the top. It's going to be much easier to do this. Obviously, the slipperier things get, or the more rushed decision making our opponent gets here. But definitely add it into your game. Start experimenting with a 4-point position, and watch how a lot of inexperienced grapplers will fall straight off. Guys, let's talk about a wrestling technique that I think is one of the most underutilized movements in all of jiu-jitsu, and that is a switch. We can hit a switch out of a 4-point position. We can hit a switch out of many positions in jiu-jitsu, but really to understand how to do the switch, we need to understand how to reach safely for it. A lot of guys will reach for a switch and they'll get their arm trapped, and the guy will be moving behind them and it hyperextends their elbow, basically like an armbar, right? It's happened to me before. I've gone for a switch on a guy, did poor technique, woke up super bruised around the elbow, super painful. So we need to basically reach pinky first. I'll show this in more detail, but we can hit a standard switch and turn this position into a single leg, turn into a pure wrestling position. Or we can hit a switch in an unorthodox manner to get entries to the legs. Again, the fact that we can try to get up and turn it back into a submission threat makes your game unique and unorthodox and unpredictable. And people will have a tough time controlling you because they don't know when you're going for height, whether you're simply standing up or gaining a height advantage to re-attack the lower half of their body or any other sort of submissions, right? So if I'm at a 4-point here and Nick's off to the side, when I want to reach for this switch, I don't want to reach thumb first. We're going to ultimately end up with positioning like this, but if I'm reaching this way and Nick starts to circle aggressively or stomp, or he kicks out with his right leg, you can see what would happen to my elbow here. So whenever I reach for a switch, I measure with my pinky. Now Nick kicks out, my arm bends in a healthy manner here, right? So when we're practicing these switches, be very careful reaching thumb towards the leg. Because again, if he slowly kicks out here, look what could potentially happen to my elbow here. I want to have purchase with the pinky here as I start to turn. Now if Nick were to kick out, I've got a good control over that leg here and we can avoid getting our elbow popped, right? So if we're in this 4-point position, we want to hit a standard switch. As we build base and we start to come up, again, we slide out to the side to create a better angle here.
Let's just we want to be around this angle here. Obviously, I don't want to be here. His leg's too far away. We want to turn to face the leg we want to attack. So the first switch, I measure with the pinky and I knee slide towards that foot. And that starts to bump his weight forward and we're immediately turning. I'm trying to get my ear to his back here, but obviously he's going to start to turn back up. But we're going to be able to turn this into wrestling scrambles from here. Or even potentially sometimes if they overcommit, then we can reverse the position. So we're in our 4-point here. I want to hit a switch, so I'm trying to face the leg I want to reach to. I'm going to reach pinky first, and we're going to bump him forward. And the trick here, if I want to keep him on his hands, lift this leg as high as possible. If I leave it low, Nick can get his hands off the ground. But if I lift it high, start driving into him, it allows us to transfer to the upper body here. So that's our switch we can use in the context of wrestling, but we're going to look at it from one more angle, right? We're here, we're trying to face the leg we want to attack. I create an anchor on that leg, and I lift it nice and high. That keeps him on his hands. We can basically arm drag off here to climb up the leg to get to his upper body here. So our switch grips lifting high. We reach closer to the groin here to pull up into a rear body lock on him. But again, our option isn't just a wrestling option. We can hit options to the legs as well, so we can be unpredictable from this position. So we're in our 4-point here. Nick has his rear body lock. I hit that measuring grip, but instead of using it to pick up the leg, I knee slide all the way through to find an arch, and we could hit him basically straight into a reap here. Let's start thinking about attacking legs straight away. We'll look at it from this angle here. So again, everything's the same initially. I still reach pinky first because I don't want to injure my arm. But as I start to slide, I'm sliding in between his legs. And we bump him onto his hands here. We can throw our reap to keep him on his hands. And we can start attacking our outside heel hooks here. Or potentially let go of that leg and still start chasing the back. One more time, guys. Reach pinky first, slide under. Because we disappear into open space, they always place their hands on the ground. We can start thinking about attacks here. The initial movement is the same for both techniques. Reach pinky first. Instead of sliding and lifting the leg, we simply slide all the way through into a rib versus pinky first. And I pick up that leg and turn back into it. So we've got two options for switches out of a 4-point. Important to be good at both options so our opponents can never predict what we're doing with that single grip. All right, guys, so we can hit another technique from here. It's kind of a switch without the switch grips. We're basically going to combine that fat man roll sort of grip with a switch motion. And you can catch your training partners, your opponents by surprise with this technique. One of my former training partners, Oliver Tarza, was always very good at it. He's very quick. But for me, what's key about this position is that we're not hitting this when our opponent's rear body lock is high. So we're in a 4-point, but they haven't quite slid their grips up to the armpit here. They're still low around the waist here. And why that's important is because we're gonna hit a switch from here and I need to be able to grab that wrist. Obviously, if his grips are close to my armpits here, it's gonna be hard to pick my hands up off the ground to grab the wrist. But generally speaking, when I return Nick to the mat here, I've got a rear body lock down here. We step in front of the knee, but we have a moment where our grips are low before we want to start sliding up the body to the armpits here. When we're under the armpits, I have a lot of weight on Nick's upper body here. When we're here, there's less weight. Nick can obviously reach back to secure my wrists here. So let's have a look at this one. But again, I can't emphasize enough that you need to drill this one a lot to be quick. We can't wait until their grips slide up the body and get under our armpits here.
So the best way to drill is from the context of Nick returning me with a knee block. Knee comes in front, immediately control the wrist. So I'm taking that fat man roll sort of grip. And what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna slide through to my left hip. And I pull Nick. Nick's hand's trapped. And again, when we land, keep control of this wrist. It makes it difficult for Nick to turn into me here. And we can start to come on top to control him. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. You let go of this and start to turn in, we got a battle here. If I keep this wrist, Nick goes to turn in, I can get my weight onto a flat Nick. And I can secure top position here. So let's look at it a couple more times. He drops me down, I secure that wrist, and I fall aggressively to my left hip and look between his legs. We keep the wrist, Nick's trying to turn in, but he's stuck flat because of that wrist control. One more time, one more angle here, guys. We're trying to keep our balance here, but Nick gets that knee in front. We throw him, and because of that wrist control, we can secure top position. So it's kind of a fat man roll combined with a hip switch. All right, guys, we're talking about the 4-point Granby. There's going to be a bit of overlap with other scenes because obviously we could do a Granby from the turtle, we could do a Granby from standing. When we get up from turtle, we're in a 4-point prior to the Granby commencing. And when we're standing, quite often our opponent will try to use a knee block to put us into a 4-point position before they completely return us to the mat. And we can use a bit of that momentum to hit the Granby. But for me, the key for these Granbys is to not hang out too long before we go for it. We just fully commit to the Granby, use as much forward momentum as possible. Sometimes our opponents will give us forward momentum when they return us to the mat. So let's take a look at how it could come up from the turtle position, right? We're in the turtle. I start to get up on Nick Ortiz. I start to circle. He's obviously going to chase me here because he doesn't want me to turn and face. One of the things I have to worry about here is Nick placing his right hook inside before hopping to the other side. To avoid him using this hook in a meaningful manner, I can bring my leg to the outside here. Now if Nick tries to place his right hook, there's no hook to place it. So when I bring this foot across, I'm going to throw my arm inside this open space here, just like we did from the turtle position. And I start to Granby here, and we can roll. And typically what happens is exactly this, right? When you have a good position on someone, and they take a movement that makes you lose that position, they get sort of this sort of frustration at being so close to something that quite often you'll find them rush back in, and we can turn that Granby straight into a shot, right? So say we're in this turtle position here, I immediately circle and get up. I worry about that hook. It's hidden from Nick now. We start to Granby from our right shoulder to our left. Nick's lost that position and he recklessly runs in, and we can turn it into a shot. Another time we can Granby out of the 4-point, and obviously this could be considered a standing Granby, but we're going to cover the options for a standing Granby too, is that if Nick has a rear body lock and he wants to hit a knee block and put me to a 4-point, he blocks it, but look what he's doing with my weight. He's throwing it in the direction that would actually help me hit the Granby here. So if we're in a standing position and they're trying to block you with a knee, as I fall and his weight's coming forward, we can still throw that arm in to hit our Granby and potentially come straight into a shot. So if I do these two by myself here, we're in our turtle position, hands followed by feet. We start circling. We bring our foot across to prevent the hook. Arm goes behind, so that way when we roll, we transfer right shoulder to left. We could potentially come straight up into a shot. We're in a standing position here. They block our knee. We're starting to fall forward. We can immediately, instead of planting the hand, rub it and roll straight over the top. So what's important with the Granby, again, we're not doing a forward roll. We're rolling from one shoulder to the other while our hips stay high. It makes it hard for our training partner to maintain any form of control on our body in that transition. All right, guys, so we can hit an overwrap just like we hit from the turtle position. We can hit it from a 4-point position as well. I will say you got to be careful with this one. If your training partner's not aware of what you're doing and they try to keep that body lock, they're going to end up slamming their head into the ground. So I'd recommend you be very safe with this technique, or you specifically target training partners you don't like. This would be a technique I would use on a person like Placido. I would target him extensively with this movement, right? So let's take a look at it. We're in a 4-point here. If Nick has good awareness from here and he feels me secure the overwrap, so you guys can see I'm securing an elbow deep grip. If Nick has good awareness and he allows me to secure this grip, he's probably going to let go as we hit a Granby with the overwrap. And you can see how he's basically ended up in a pretty vulnerable position, and I can start to come up and start chasing his back. So that's the safest option, right? So let's just take a look at it one more time. If Nick gets too reckless with how close this leg is, obviously he keeps it out of range. That's going to be problematic for me using this technique. But if he's keeping that in range, I'm just going to grab it, lift my outside leg, and hit a shoulder roll towards the leg. I keep this grip as tight as I can. You can see how it off balances him. And we can start to come up and chase his back. If he doesn't let go, I'll try to be very careful here, but you'll see what happens, right? So I take the overwrap, and he starts to come with me. Watch how his head starts to face plant, and we can use our hips to get over the top here. So we'll do it one more time. If Nick decides to keep this grip, and this will happen because Nick thinks he's very, very close to a good position here. So he doesn't want to let go of this grip. So if I take the overwrap, start to roll through, you can see me buckling his knee in. It's easy for me to bring those knees to the chest and hop over the top to secure a dominant position out of the scramble. But again, just like a lot of the techniques we've been doing, they can be done from all levels, ground level, 4-point, standing. So again, overwrap works really good from turtle, works really good from a 4-point position. Guys, I'm going to add this in. It should speak for itself, but like most things in jiu-jitsu, we have to say, right, if we're in a 4-point position and we can stand up, because again, there's less options for our opponent the higher we are off the ground. There's less of a quick path to a submission the higher we are off the ground. All they can do is slam us to the ground. But again, we've got soft mats. If you know how to fall, you're not going to get hurt that badly. But I'll show you how we could potentially stand up in 2 different ways from 4-point. One is if our opponent's positioning's off, we just stand the fuck up. The other one, we're going to use a technique that I recently stole from Placido, and Placido stole it from Jaden Cox. So it could be Chinese whispers, maybe I'll fuck it up, but let's hope it goes well. So if we're in 4-point here, if Nick keeps his hands close to my armpits here, there's more weight in my upper body. So obviously I can't just stand up from here. I could start to walk back, build base, because now my weight's above my hips and it's going to be easier for me to stand up. If Nick is absolutely all for jiu-jitsu and he has this grip closer to my hips here, say for example, he put me to a 4-point with a knee block. Let's just show that, right? He puts me to a 4-point with a knee block here and keeps his grip back here. I could literally just stand up. So if you can stand up, right? But a good technical option here is just going to knee block me, put me to my hands, and be here. The further I can walk back, if we look at this angle here, the further I walk back, the further my butt comes. And now my weight is more above my legs, so I can use my legs to stand back up. Most simple option, right? Let's look at it if Nick's really hanging heavy on me here. If Nick's weight's off center here, it's harder for me to walk, but I just need to bring my weight underneath the both of us here. If I try to stand up here with Nick hanging off center, even if I'm central, it's super, super heavy. But if I start to lower that leg and get weight underneath the both of us, I'm gonna have a much greater ability to stand up. So we'll do it on both sides. I'm in a 4-point here. Nick's weight is to my left. I need to bring my weight underneath both of us and we can stand up quite easily. 2 simple ways to get up from the 4-point. All right, guys, we're going to move on to the final section, and that is the standing rear body lock. A position that I would imagine many jiu-jitsu guys are kind of scared to be in. Everyone has their fear of being suplexed out of this position. But realistically, as long as we control posture and we're aware of our opponent's options based on the positioning he's in, we can actually stay quite safe in these areas. And also, as you get used to being thrown around in positions like this, you start to realize that it's not necessarily as dangerous as you think. Obviously, if you lift someone up and they tense up and freak out when they hit the ground, it's going to be much, much worse than someone that you pick up that's quite relaxed from these positions. And obviously, when you're relaxed and you're not thinking about getting injured out of these slams, the second you can hit the ground, you can start to use that to create scrambling options, whether that is they slam you to the ground, you start to get head height, get back up and force them to slam you again, which in the context of a jiu-jitsu match is very, very fatiguing for your opponent or your training partners. Generally speaking, I find guys only have 3, 4, 5 max big explosive movements in them, and any time from any position where we can make someone overexert themselves athletically, we start to fatigue them. And just remember that, like, you getting slammed doesn't burn anything out of your gas tank, but if they slam you and that slam isn't perfectly executed, they are going to be fatiguing themselves to do it. Sometimes when they slam us, we can hit a Granby. Sometimes when they slam us, we can immediately get head high and look for that reverse C position we were talking about earlier. Sometimes we're just going to get slammed, but you have to accept that as a risk of the game. But again, the higher we are off the ground when our opponent's behind us, the further they are away from a submission. And the further they are away from a control position that leads to a submission. We could be on a hip, we could be on our knees in a turtle, we could be in a 4-point, we could be standing. The higher we get in these positions, the safer you are from a submission. But again, you are at risk of being lifted and slammed. But I would say the risks of being slammed dangerously from those positions are probably overstated. So what am I talking about when I talk about a standing rear body lock? Here's if Nick's behind me here and he's secured a body lock. He's behind me out of these positions. And obviously my hands aren't on the ground because we consider that a 4-point position. So in terms of things Nick could do from here, the most obvious is if my posture is too high, he could just pick me up and slam me into the ground. And we get slammed down, right? Generally speaking, that's going to be the most common slam out of there. Obviously, guys could hit a back arch suplex, but again, very rare in jiu-jitsu. And realistically, you probably wouldn't do that to your training partners unless you really didn't like them, right? Some of the more common things out of here is probably the number one is Nick's going to bring a knee in front and put me to a 4-point position. He's going to knock me to my hands, right? So we can start thinking about where we're in danger with what. If I'm standing straight up, now it's easy for Nick to get his hips close to me and pick me up. If I'm bending forward like this and a lot of my weight's forward and Nick's trying to pick me up from here, it's going to be very tough to pick me up in these angles. So we need to work out a posture we can take from here that sort of keeps us safe in terms of a lot of options here, right? For me, I like to lean a little bit forward and have my hands next to my knees. So if Nick's trying to bring a knee in front, we can block it. He runs to the other side. We're trying to block these knee options here. And we're pretty safe from being slammed here. Again, I don't want to be too high here. As my posture comes up, I run the risk of being lifted. We can negate some of those risks by getting elbows inside. It's going to be harder for Nick to lift me here when his grip's stretched. But if his grip's very, very well established here, and I start to posture up, we're in danger, right? I'm in danger if I start running away from Nick. He can match steps and foot sweep me here and knock me down. And generally speaking, that movement's going to really knock me to a hip here. We have to be aware of our balance here. Nick can start messing with my feet here. He can start hitting foot sweeps. But as long as I'm relaxed and I'm anticipating his next movement, if I'm stiff and frozen here, whatever Nick does is going to have a strong effect on my entire body. So usually the more relaxed we are from here, the more loose we are, if Nick kicks a foot now, it's not gonna have the same effect as, again, if I'm stiff and I'm like, I'm gonna get killed from here, he's gonna kick that foot, my whole body's gonna go flying. So in terms of your basic positioning, we don't wanna be bent too far forward because Nick could just push me onto my hands. And we don't wanna be too high up because he can lift me very easily. We wanna be a neutral ground here so that wherever Nick's going, I'm not perfectly in the posture that would give him those movements. But again, I want you to experiment with your training partners out of that position. Start positional sparring in that position, obviously, as you get some further options out of here. You can even practice having your training partners lift you and return you to the mat so you get comfortable and obviously overcome that fear. And I think that fear is very strong in everyone when they start working those positions. It's one of the reasons jiu-jitsu guys don't get up from here. We'd rather concede to our back in a turtle position and be very conservative in our options. But if you get good at getting up, you're going to realize that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys aren't very strong from that rear body lock because they don't deal with guys that are good defensively from there. The only guys they deal with that are good defensively from there are wrestlers. And when they're dealing with a wrestler, they're just going to pull guard. So they don't explore those sort of gray areas where we can combine jiu-jitsu and wrestling. All right, guys, let's talk about some the more flashy options we can do out of this standing rear body lock. And these options are going to come about if my opponent or training partner's head position's incorrect. Obviously, there are things we can do to force head position to sort of come off center here, but one of the greatest options of a rear body lock is if you can throw your arm back for a whizzer. So let's take a look at that rep. Nick's got the rear body lock here. Obviously, if his head's central here, it's going to be very tough for me to throw a whizzer, right? But you can see if his head's off center here, and we're in this rear body lock zone, if I can reach back and secure a whizzer, now we've reclaimed some of the battle. When they really mess it up and you can take a whizzer out of this position, obviously it's going to be a very good thing. Typically though, we would use the whizzer to prevent the back take. We have this whizzer in, Nick's got an underhook here. The whizzer is blocking him taking my back. If there was no whizzer here, he can just circle and take my back. But again, if he takes a rear body lock here, and he's leaving his head too low, it's actually very easy for me to start turning my hips in and throwing this whizzer into position, right? What we can do, once we secure this whizzer, is we can start hitting a toss called the Harai Goshi. I hit the Harai Goshi on Dante Leon, and Flow Grappling will not stop sharing it. I'm happy about that, obviously. I like Dante, feel bad for Dante, but they share it every time I compete, which I think is pretty hilarious, to be honest. The only judo experience I have is a yellow belt in high school in Australia. Apart from that, this is just me watching YouTube videos, trying to think, how would I do this from this position, right? So one of the things I do when I secure this whizzer is I want to be as heavy on Nick's arms as possible here. And that makes it hard for Nick to get his hips in. If his hips come in and his head comes up, he can start obviously dumping me back, or if I can't really throw from these positions here. So as soon as we throw this whizzer in, I'm starting to be as heavy on his shoulder as possible. And I want to start to think about securing the second arm. And when I'm heavy on his shoulder here, I start walking towards his head. And that starts to provide us a better angle to reach this leg. The rule for me from here is if I have control over both Nick's arms, we go Harai Goshi. If I only have control over one of Nick's arms, I go for the Uchimata. So what's the difference between Harai Goshi and Uchimata? Harai is my leg goes past both legs. Uchimata, my leg's kicking one leg. And I'm always trying to kick close to the knee here. I ideally want to buckle his knee as we throw him there. So when again, because by the nature of the body lock here, we've secured that second arm and I secure it above the elbow. When I secure it above the elbow and Nick tries to let go of his grip and retract his arm, we've got control over it. If I secure above the elbow here and he tries to pull his arm back, we lose control. So I want to grab the elbow and control it. We're walking away and towards the leg that we want to throw. So I'm exaggerating it here, but what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna step my leg in line, the non-throwing leg, and I'm gonna place my leg behind Nick's leg here. And in a fast motion here, we kick that leg. So I'm heavy on the whizzer, controlling above the elbow, running towards the leg I want to kick. I hop in line with his foot, place my leg below the knee. I start to turn his upper body with the whizzer and the elbow control, and I turn my hips the direction of his hips, and we pull him over that leg here. So Nick's got a rear body lock here, but you can see his head's out of position here. So I throw my whizzer in. And again, we're not going to be throwing straight away so long as we're heavy on this whizzer. If I just throw a whizzer in a shitty way, yeah, it's going to take me shoulders behind my hips here. So we throw this arm and we start to walk away and we control that elbow here. I walk towards the leg, I want to toss, and we step in line and we change our angle and we can throw them from here. So I want you to, basically, we can practice it. I used to practice a drill like this. Well, I would set everything up for the throw, but I wouldn't throw him. I'd do it 5 times. So I'm walking. We can even start to get a bit more. We get him to lift. And then we'll throw him properly. So that's how I would set up and practice the Harai Goshi. We're setting it up out of a rear body lock, but obviously anytime you have a whizzer, you can start setting up that throw. Guys, let's talk about a hook, and I stole this hook from a former Penn State wrestler, now MMA fighter, Gino Morelli. This is a great hook if you're really worried about being suplexed out of this position, but it's also a great hook because we can set up Harai Goshis or Uchimatas from here. So Nick's got the rear body lock and we've thrown that whizzer in. But this will be a great time to do it. When we throw the whizzer in, I feel like I'm not really getting my hips away from Nick too much. You can see his posture's high. Ideally, the Harai Goshi, Nick's bent over at the hips like this. That gives us super easy throw. But if his hips come in, he can even pick me up and suplex me from here, obviously, because his hips are under his shoulders. So what I want to do to protect myself here is my inside foot is going to hook inside Nick's leg here. So I just take that foot and I wrap my toes around his shin. So now if Nick does pick me up, that leg limits his ability to really get me high here. If I don't have it and Nick goes to lift me, you can see how high he can throw me. So it's a little safety measure here. So I bring that foot in and I hook it. But we can hit reversals out of here as well. So the beauty of this hook is Nick cannot easily pull his leg out. So what I'll do is when we're here and he gets his hips too high, I'll hook it and I'll start hopping into him and lifting up that leg. And you can see guys start to pull over. Looks like a bullshit technique, but it works surprisingly well. And it's sort of a dilemma here. We've got a 1-2 combo on it, right? So if I hook it and Nick freaks out and he rips his leg out, look what happens to his posture. We can go back to the throw. Because to rip his leg out, he has to bend at the hips. So let's say rear body lock, I threw it, but Nick's too powerful, he gets his hips in tight. So I hook that leg, and again, it's a toe wrap. And I'm gonna start running into him with my right hip. I run into him so he takes weight off this leg. Once weight is off this leg and it's on his other leg, I don't let him put it back on the ground. And we can start to circle to knock him down here. But again, 1-2 combo. If he rips his leg out, we go back to the throw. So we're here. I'm worried about it's sort of like a heel hook pressure, but as long as I'm putting the boot in on my heel, it's pretty strong. But again, sometimes Nick will overpower me here, rip it out. But look, he bends over at the hips. So we can go back to our throw again. So again, Gino Morelli showed me that and I stole it from him. But it's a great way to prevent getting suplexed out of a body lock with a whizzer. Guys, we hit the Harai Goshi, but anytime we have a whizzer, we can also hit a Uchimata. So I explained previously, If I have control over the whizzer and his secondary arm, I go for the harai, and that means I step cross body and throw him over both legs. If we only have control over one arm, we go the uchimata. Why is that? Because if I have control over the whizzer and Nick's far arm, I can maintain his posture breaking over the side I want to throw him. If he rips this arm back and away from me, it's hard for me to bring him over the side. It's not impossible. Obviously, the whizzer, I could start to turn his upper body, but it would have to be timed perfect. I would have to be able to throw him like that. But again, it's kind of unrealistic. You'd have to be dealing with a pretty shitty opponent to be able to hit a harai, no gi, without control over both arms. And where this would come up is if perhaps I've thrown him before. So maybe I throw this through, start getting my hips back, and he brings this arm away from me. So again, if this arm is close, I'm going to control above the elbow and launch, right? But if it's back, now we want to hit an uchimata, because the uchimata, again, we can hit this with only the whizzer. What do I want to do for the uchimata? I'm going to post my hand on the floor, and I'm going to look to kick Nick's leg here, and we can keep a hopping pressure. I explained this briefly in the butterfly guard, so the sweeping section. The reason we have to hook the leg is because we want to be able to turn Nick's hips. We want to turn one hip over the other. The only way I can do that is by kicking close to the leg. No one's hips are going to turn when we kick the groin. Nick's just going to hop with this pressure. So I'll show you a better demonstration of that, right? I'll do it wrong. When I kick the grip, Nick just comes with me. So hand on the floor, my left foot's going to replace my right, and I'm going to try to face my hips the same direction as Nick's hips. So don't try to hit this facing here. We want to face the same direction as their hips. So if we're playing out of here, left foot replaces the right as we angle change, and the hand goes on the floor. Look how if I kick his hips, if I kick his groin, he just stays square with me. He keeps balancing as I keep hopping. If we hook the leg and start to elevate the leg with each hop, his left hip, the side I'm kicking, is going to elevate over the other hip, and he will lose his balance and he'll fall over, right? So let's look at it when it's done correctly. Left foot replaces right. Right foot kicks the inside of the near leg. Hand posts on the ground for extra support. And I hop into him here. Nick tries to keep his balance, and we're able to toss him over the top here. So essentially, what's happening is as Nick's being thrown, this leg is doing this, and his hips have to collapse. If we kick the groin, Nick just does this. And there's nothing that's forcing the throw from there. So again, Nick's behind me here. I throw that whizzer, he lets go, he's worried. He's been harai goshi before. So we're gonna hop in, left replaces right, right kicks the inside of the knee, hand post on the floor, and we hop and circle with them here. And we can sweep them over the top here. So it's a great uchimata, harai goshi, you've got to have that one too, because we need to have throwing options from there, whether we have control over both arms or control over one arm. Just remember though, just like with a butterfly sweep, control, elevate with the inside of the knee so that one hip comes over the other. Obviously a butterfly guard is one powerful motion. Uchimata, we hit a powerful kick initially to elevate that hip, and as we hop, we're able to take that hip over the top of the other one. You won't be able to do that if you kick the groin. Two other techniques we can hit from the uchimata, very high percentage techniques, is we can use it as a path to the front head, and we can also use it as a path to attack the legs. So let's take a look at how they might come up, right? So Nick's in that rear body lock, his head's off center here. His head off center again allows us to take the whizzer. If he keeps two arms here, harai goshi. If one arm comes back because he's worried about being thrown, we hit the uchimata. So to go to the front head, I'm going to do everything the same. I'm gonna still post a hand on the ground. We're gonna launch him. And as he keeps his balance here, I'm gonna whip him around to secure the front head. So rather than hop, 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 to knock him to a hip and take one hip over the other, if we're dealing with someone that we already know is pretty good balance from here, maybe we've hit the uchi before and they're realizing that if they hand post and they really get high hips, they can keep those hips kind of level and negate some of our ability to take the internal hip over the outside hip. What we would look to do is use our whizzer. I mean, to practice this movement, I'm throwing him with that whizzer, allowing his head to come forward. We're just doing it out of an uchimata setup. Left replaces right. Nick keeps his balance from here, so I just whip his head around and come straight to the front head. One more time. We're in our position here, we got our whizzer, we hop. Nick keeps his balance here and hops out of my leg. So obviously I've lost the ability to throw. But because I'm keeping heavy on his, with this whizzer on his underhook here, he's struggling to posture, and I take my hand off the ground and whip him to secure a chin strap here. So again, very low risk option for him. But we do have another option we can do, and that is to roll to the legs. I'm not going to teach the flying scissor just because it's too fucking dangerous. This will be a safer option. And we sort of did some of this previously when we were talking about how we have to use the back of our hand to control before we roll through, right? It's going to be the exact same thing from a standing position. For reference, if you want to see me hit this, I was able to hit it on Tyrotolo. Tyrotolo is similar build to me, probably even longer. He was able to keep his balance very well off the uchimata throw in our match. So again, to be unpredictable, unorthodox, I decided to go to the legs from here. How would I do that? Let's have a look. So when we hit the uchimata, if we're landing here, I've thrown Nick and he places his leg back on the ground here, and I want to get to this leg. The beauty of this is if he wants to fight my whizzer here, he needs to bring his legs close. If his legs walking close, now, because his hips are underneath him, he can posture up easier. So now when Nick postures up from here, he has more power. If his legs are far away from him and he's trying to posture up, very weak. So what does it mean when someone brings their legs closer to you? As Nick walks his legs in, we can reach him easier. So again, you can see I'm placing the back of my hand on Nick's leg, and I'm going to switch from a whizzer to the far side armpit grip here. And we're just going to roll through. And obviously, we can attack the legs, or we can simply use it as a sweeping option. What I love about this is it's a takedown turned into a leg attack. They're so different from each other. Very difficult for Nick to predict what's going to come next. We're going high, we're going low, we're really mixing up attacks here. So again, we hit our uchimata. Nick keeps his balance here, right? But I'm staying heavy on the whizzer. If you guys pay attention to our left leg, as Nick walks his in closer, I walk my left in closer. And we make a quick transition where we reach both grips at the same time. And I roll over my left shoulder, my outside shoulder, to take him over the top. I always like to land on top. I don't like to land here because with Nick's momentum, he can start to turn away and already hide the heel. Versus if we land on top of him here and he's turning away, we can start thinking about attacking the back. If he stays still here, then I can think about going to the legs, whether that's rolling through the middle or pulling both legs back towards us here. So again, two great options out of an uchimata position. That would be the front headlock option and rolling to the legs. I want you to develop all of those options and use them when the time's right so that your opponent is never too comfortable defending you. If his hips are close, we invert to the legs. If he's got good balance and clears out leg, we whip it to the front headlock and turn their strong position of a rear body lock into our front headlock or submission opportunity. All right, guys, so we covered the reverse overback grip in the reverse C section. We were talking about how with reverse C, we're not looking for height if our opponent simply allows us to get up. we have defensive options when we crowd the head and force poor posture in our opponent. I'm going to show you the same two techniques. We're just going to do a quick refresher on it, but I just want you to know that we can get it out of a standard rear body lock grip if we're looking for defensive options. When Nick's head is low on my right side here, we can take a whizzer. But obviously if his head's on the other side, there's no whizzer, but I can still reach for that far armpit here. So have a look. I'm reaching deeper than I want to go. If I simply reach for Nick's armpit and he lifts his head, kills my grip every time. I want to not strike his head, but I want to hit his head hard enough that it crowds his head, right? So when I do it, I reach past, just like we were doing with that whizzer grip, where the whizzer control was sinking into their armpit and would force their posture to break. And when they have poor posture, they're easier to counterattack, they're easier to throw. So when we control this grip, we want to crowd their head with that right hand here, and then we want to secure it as deep as we can. We could secure it at the armpit, like I said, but here he's going to kill that with posture. We want to crowd it and reach deep. So I might even end up reaching towards his pec here. But what's important about that depth is Nick tries to posture. He can posture, but it's not going to be as easy for him. He's going to really have to muscle that. And now what are we doing with our other hand? We're controlling the elbow here. We control the elbow because we want him in this position. We want him in this posture now. Once I've secured these grips, I can attack from here. So I don't want to not control this arm and have him lose it, because there's not much I can do when I just control the armpit. I need it in conjunction with the elbow here. So when I reach for this grip, I'll start running away from Nick. And as Nick goes to follow me, we can hit those tosses again. So it's like kind of like a Harai Goshi, but we're doing it off the reverse overback. But what makes Nick easy to throw is him chasing me here. So his head's in my left side. Obviously there's no whizzer, but I can control his body still. Remember, we reach deep, we control the elbow. I'm running my hips away from Nick. If Nick gets his hips close to me, he kills my posture break, even if it's a deep grip. So to make that difficult, I'm running my left hip into his grip. And now for me to hit this throw, I want to step past, step in line with his feet, step past, and do that little hip hop as we turn to face him here. If we're really worried about being thrown, because again, like I was saying, if Nick gets his hips under and gets head high, now he can start to lift me. He can lift me really easy from here and potentially suplex me in this direction. What we can do is, if I'm crowding Nick's head and he starts to get posture, I'll hook around this leg, just like we did with that little Gino hook from the Uchimata position, from the Harai Goshi position. If Nick goes to lift me here, he can only lift me so far. And what we can do with this leg is Nick will have his hips in, he'll lift, and then we can scoop this leg up for the toss. So when we're here and Nick goes to lift me, then I hop in line with his toes, I'm hopping in line with his legs, and we can launch him from there. So if we're really worried about being thrown, we want to control any anchor we can around that leg. But again, just a refresher again, if I get here on Nick, I don't just have to throw him. I can place that reverse Z hook in again, and I can hop under his legs and sweep him overhead. So we have sweeping options as well. So this one's super easy, basically a Yoko Sumigeshi sweep here. So we place that butterfly hook in. I don't just fall where my foot is, I hop between his base here. So obviously I'm a bit bigger than Nick, it's going to be harder for me to do, but I need a hop between his legs to provide me more leverage for that sweep. So from that position, obviously we can go whizzer or we can go reverse overback. So we're finding ourselves ultimately where we ended up with the reverse Z position from a standing position, but instead of taking it from the ground, we're reaching through and threatening it from the back, from the standing rear body lock. All right, guys, now we're going to talk about how we can roll to the legs from the back. great technique. We just need to ensure that we control both legs. What encourages this move is basically conceding to a risk of a suplex sort of position, right? But if we do control two legs, they won't be able to lift us. Obviously, we're going to be reaching for either two legs. So if I wake up Nick Ortiz, it's been a long day. So when Nick has a rear body lock, right, if I'm bending over at the waist, he's going to be less likely to have these legs close because he's not thinking of lifting me at such a poor angle. But if I start to posture up and he wants to lift me, he brings these legs close because, again, if his hips are under him, it's an easier lift for him. It's going to be a less fatiguing lift. So he'd obviously be able to lift me here. But if I control, so if I'm postured up, he brings his hips in, I immediately reach for the legs. Nick tries to lift me here. Very, very difficult here. So the way I roll to these legs is it's going to be a complete forward roll. I won't shoulder roll if I have control over both legs. And I'm going to use my inside leg to give him a bit of a bump here, because sometimes when we deal with a bigger opponent and we go to roll to the legs, they just hold us here. We have this kind of awkward moment, right? But when I control both legs and I'm trying to reach wrist deep, I just fully commit. And I fully commit because my head is between my legs. And we hook these legs, we roll through, and we get access to the legs here. So real safe technique, surprisingly safe. But we're at the back here. And I mean, it could come about where I'm bent over at the hips, but Nick's just negligent of his foot position here. If his feet are close, relatively close, I can step back to grab it. Obviously, if his legs are far away, I don't want to be reaching too far. But if he's in this gray area where I can force him, I'll reach through, and then we roll through to secure the legs. But again, a great way to get this on base is wrestlers, because if I have a rear body lock on Nick and he starts posturing up, I might think, oh shit, it's a great opportunity to pick him up. So what we can do, we can sort of bait him. Obviously it's risky, but if we want to create scrambling submission opportunities out of bad positions, we have to take some risk. It's up to the guy in the bad position to take a risk. We're not just going to wait here until a defensive option presents itself. So if I want to make something happen, I might start to concede my posture. And as Nick comes in, immediately grab these legs and we roll through to create a submission opportunity. So again, just practice. Obviously, if you're terrible flexibility, probably not the best option. You're going to hit your head. But if we can reach deep and I just fall forward, no danger at all to your neck in that position. Again, very, very high percentage. Freaks people out when you reach back and control both their legs from that position. All right, guys, we're gonna look at how we can create a reversal from this position. This technique's, it's something I've seen people teach in self-defense courses, but just because it's taught in those bullshit self-defense courses doesn't mean we can't make it work in a jiu-jitsu environment. So this technique is a knee block kosoda.
Oh, Craig. We don't speak Japanese anymore.
My apologies. No Japanese at the B team, guys. So let's take a look at how we can get this. Nick's got a rear body lock here. If I can step behind his inside leg, we create a block on his knees here. Now, sorry, on his inside knee. Now to take him down, all we need to do is send him backwards over that knee. And the easiest way to do that is to use my upper body to cover him and drive his weight backwards. I'm lifting him up here, but obviously we would take it straight to the ground here. So again, if anyone's complacent with their inside knee position and you feel confident you can step behind it, so obviously if Nick's leaving it close, we could grab it, but maybe we're dealing with an opponent that's very good defensively in leg lock exchanges. So what we can do is we can just step behind. So when I'm here on Nick, I'm blocking his outside leg. Again, we don't want to let him bring that in front of us here. So I block it, step behind that inside knee, and now Nick's trying to pull it out. It's trapped, and we can roll backwards and take him down. So again, super simple technique. Again, it gets taught in self-defense courses, but it really does work And because a lot of people aren't expecting it in a competition jiu-jitsu environment, it catches them by surprise. All right, guys, let's hit another move from the standing rear body lock. I first saw Philippe Andrew hit something similar to this. One of those moments where you watch a guy do something, you think that's cool, you don't really break it down, it's in the back of your mind somewhere, and you try to wing it in training and you start coming up with some ideas about how they might have done it. Being myself, I was too lazy to go back and confirm whether this is how he does it, but I'm going to give him credit anyway because that's where the inspiration came from. It's kind of a dangerous move. I wasn't going to teach the flying scissor because it could blow out your training partner's knees, but although this one's risky, I think I'll put it in there because I haven't seen it taught before. So let's take a look at it. I catch this one most when Nick is on my left side. I'm blocking, and I sense that maybe he wants to switch sides and run to the other side. Sometimes when they run to the other side, I might be too slow to block this knee, and he hits that knee in front and returns me. So if I'm blocking the left on this side, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a shelf on his inside knee with my outside leg. So I'm going to step back and post a hand. And you can see I've blocked his knee here, I've trapped it. And I start to roll onto my right hip as I bring my left leg through. And we create a reversal opportunity where obviously we can go to the legs, or so long as I control the top leg, we can potentially clear that reverse half guard and come on top. So Nick's on my left side, and he starts to run to my right. So I post a hand on the floor and hit that knee block here. And obviously we can go to the legs, or we could clear it and secure the top position. We'll try a few different angles of this one. It's kind of a strange technique, but it has been surprisingly high percentage for me, mainly because people aren't expecting it. We take that post and we isolate that knee. So I would say the quicker you do it and the harder you commit to the roll, the safer it is on their leg, because their leg doesn't exactly commit a lot of weight to the ground. So when we create that knee shelf and immediately go for the roll, that's minimizing weight we put on their leg, and we're taking them over with momentum. I'm not trapping their leg, sitting there for a second and trying to aggressively force them over that leg, which obviously could damage the knee, potentially the ankle. What I'm trying to do is create a momentary block on the knee and roll through, taking them over the top. And generally speaking, a intelligent, safe grappler is going to go with that momentum to avoid a serious injury. All right, guys, we're going to do a standing Granby now. So just a quick refresher, what I covered previously in the 4-point Granby is I briefly mentioned that if they hit a knee block or they go to throw you to the ground with that knee block, you can use that forward momentum to load up on a Granby. I'm going to give that a quick refresher, just so it's in your minds when you're thinking about standing Granbys. But we can also power up and hit a standing Granby and potentially create a scrambling opportunity. But again, if Nick's behind me here, if Nick wants to put me to the ground and he brings this knee in front, he's taking forward momentum this direction, and I can't step because he's blocking my knee. That's what's driving me to the ground. And the only way he creates that is with upper body weight. So as he throws me forward, we can use that opportunity. We can create a scramble opportunity off of his momentum. So again, we're here, he's driving us down. Because he's driving us down, he's heading in the direction of the Granby, and we can basically, again, use his momentum to take us over. So again, we're going to bring that arm behind, whichever direction he chooses to go. If he's carrying us this direction, he's blocking us. You hit that shoulder roll, potentially load up straight into a shot. A good little drill you can practice for this technique is basically, we can alternate back and forth. So Nick hits, he takes me down, I hit a Granby. As he charges into me, I take a shot to the back, and then Nick hits a Granby. I charge him, hits that, he goes to knock me down. We take that shot to the back. So you guys can turn into a circular drill, a bit of fun for the knee block version. Now let's have a look at how we could potentially power up. So Nick's behind me here. what I can do is I can step out to load myself up for this Granby here. So rather than just roll, which Nick's probably going to crush me, I'm going to step my leg as far off center as possible to load up for this roll. So we get that forward momentum. We're creating the momentum he's not giving us in this situation. Whichever side we choose to go, right? I'm going to hop off center. So I'm not just going to roll. We hit that shoulder roll. So two versions of the standing Granby. One, where they're trying to bring us down, we use their forward momentum to carry us through. The second, we reposition our feet to create our own momentum, making it hard for them to hold on. And you guys can turn that into a bit of a circular drill, like me and Nick demonstrated. All right, guys, let's take a look at how we could counter a technique that Renzo Gracie, I believe he made famous. He used it in his final fight against Yuki Kondo. And it's a way of basically trying to expedite the process from when we have a standing rear body lock to when we get to the hooks on the ground. And the way he did that was he would secure a rear body lock here. He would place his hook inside. But what's key about this technique is I keep weight onto Nick Ortiz's right leg. And I start hop, hop, hop. And we're able to take the back immediately out of a standing rear body lock. Very, very strong technique. And obviously it's a great shortcut to go from standing to immediately on the hooks. I say it's a shortcut because that's usually very difficult. It's very difficult to take someone from a standing rear body lock to the mat and end up in a dominant position as quick as that. But that's not to say that we can't counter techniques like this. So if Nick has me in the rear body lock and he starts coming around the side to place the hook in, what I need to do is take my reverse over back grip. We need this grip, right? Because it allows me to not put all of my weight on my inside leg. Because we're gonna have to hop this leg out, right? If Nick's heavy on this leg, if I can't step with this leg, I fall over. So the way we can prevent that is with our over back grip. That's gonna limit Nick's ability to load my inside leg up. So as Nick starts hopping here, I'm gonna grab the calf of the inside hook. Nick keeps hopping, 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 and I'm gonna step out and step as deep as I can. And now we've potentially turned it into mount, or at least we've turned it into top position here. But again, this looks, some people are worried about that technique Enzo uses because they see intertwining of the legs from a standing position, could get caught up and get injured, but it's something we have to deal with in competition. I don't think it's as risky if you go with it. And it's definitely not as risky as if we take that reverse overback grip because we can keep that leg light, right? So Nick's behind me again. We're gonna take our overback grip and control this calf. So now as Nick starts hopping, he's not putting as much weight into the leg as he thinks. And we're able to step past and basically kill that shortcut he wants, right? So we're now overback. We control the calf. I step outside the line of his hook and I step as deep as I can so that they fall beneath me. So I would say that when you go for shortcuts like that technique, you're going to be more likely to lose everything or get reversed. There's a reason people take conservative options because it leaves our opponents or training partner with less strong counters or reversals. So understand that when you try to take shortcuts in positions like this, you risk losing everything or you risk getting reversed in a serious way. Again, though, those risky options are fun. That's part of the reason jiu-jitsu is fun. And I wouldn't say not to go for it. Just be aware, riskier options could lead to even worse positions for you.